Welcome back to Tea Time at Birkin. We will continue in the same fashion that we have for the last few days. So we look forward to the questions, and let's have the first one.
Ajahn, our first question will be a live question from Mark S. in Falkland, Canada.
Thank you, Ajahn. I have a question with regards to the cultivation of metta. Which of these two following conditions require the greater effort to accept and overcome through practice? The body's relationship to physically unpleasant feelings, or the mind's relationship to emotionally unpleasant feelings?
Yes, good. This is something that people need to do just for their own clarity, is to separate bodily feelings from mental feelings, which are, we would say, emotional feelings. And they can both be difficult depending on the severity of the bodily feelings, but primarily the most skill involved is dealing with emotional structures. So what's happening here is that you're attempting to replace and sustain a kind of ongoing feeling of goodwill, friendliness. And what is it that you're replacing with that? You're replacing anger and greed, irritability, all kinds of negative emotions, including sadness, grief, depression, and also unsettled, over-energetic experiences, agitation, what we call bipolar tendencies. Everybody, this idea about bipolar, you see this in some individuals. It's very exaggerated. The teeter-totter swings from extreme energies and heightened feelings to heavy depression. But everybody, all normal people, have something like that, a little bit of a swing in that direction. Metta can stabilize that, and you can end up operating on a smooth, continuous energy. And so it overcomes the five hindrances and produces a kind of a continuing, ongoing mental health, just pure, what we would call being mentally and emotionally healthy. And don't overlook the idea that when we look for the feeling of loving kindness, the emotional feeling of loving kindness, whenever you're feeling really well, awake, lucid, without fear, without concern, without greed, without anger, those are characteristics of loving kindness. As far as the feelings in the body are another practice again, and I talked about this a couple of days ago, that the practice of loving kindness can be a way of overcoming bodily pain. And maybe somebody in this audience will become a loving kindness therapist, just for people who have physical pain. It would be great service. I've told lots of people, go and organize some sort of group, especially if you happen to have the right kind of voice and the right kind of demeanor, to just people with chronic pain in their body. All they have to do is come twice a week or even a few days, day after day, and have to listen to the voice of another talk them into loving kindness. And they might be in wheelchairs, they might even have to be lying down, etc. So this can be done as a kind of a group therapy, that the voice of another pulls them into this feeling of profound goodwill, and can soothe and give ease to types of physical feelings that even strong analgesics and painkillers can't actually touch. Sometimes these strong painkillers they start to not work after a while, and that's a horror for people. They can't get out of pain. So this is something very, very potent. from a scientific type of explanation, there are chemicals within your body that are more potent than any kind of painkillers, and they can be released through the right induction. So it's a trick that everybody should work on and everybody should notice. You might not notice it because you're walking, if you're feeling a feeling of abundant loving kindness, goodwill for the world, please carefully examine the feelings in your body and notice that the body is either absence, it simply hardly has any substance to it, hardly has any weight to it, and the feelings are neutral or flooded with pleasant feelings. So this is what the Buddha talks about very specifically. This is a strong therapy for physical pain and also emotional distress. Emotional distress is worse, but take your physical pain. What we want to do is not add anything to physical pain. And so this is the simile of the Buddha gives is a man is shot with an arrow, and then he does a strange thing. He takes another arrow and jabs it into him. What is the first arrow? Physical pain. What's the second arrow? Emotional distress over the physical pain. So he's saying we have a choice about how we feel about physical pain. Don't make it worse. You already have one arrow in you, don't stick another one in. That is, why me? Why this pain? I can't stand this. I hate this. I don't want pain. This kind of, I'm so sad. This kind of aggravation of the pain is unnecessary and harmful. So loving kindness allows you to switch the mode of the emotions. When you have physical pain, you can switch the mode of emotion, not add to it at all. And if you can generate loving kindness deeply enough, the pain itself disappears, and it can be quite astonishing. And many, many meditators have reported this, that they're in pain of some sort, even because of holding one posture for a long time, and then suddenly it disappears. And it's a shocking experience. The pain just disappears. The mind is capable of releasing some sort of a painkiller that sweeps all the bodily feeling away. So both of them are challenges to the ordinary person, but this is why I would say that everybody needs to practice ahead of time. Don't wait to get dragged out of a traffic accident in the back of an ambulance before you start practicing this. But at least, having gone through a 10-day loving kindness retreat, having heard these words many times, I hope you go over the talks and the tea times again, all of you who are listening, so that you are actually prepared, because it's highly likely, I would say it's almost impossible to get through life without having these kind of situations where strong physical discomfort and pain comes to you in one way or another. And then, of course, challenging emotional situations. So this is medicine for both of those. It would be very, very important for you to actually carefully consider this and invest heavily some time into the cultivation of this. This has a fantastic use in real life. This is not an esoteric thing. This is how you deal with the pain of real life, both bodily pain and emotional pain. So do practice, get your skills together. We do all kinds, we train as lifeguards, we train as how to swim, because somebody's going to fall in the water sooner or later. You got to know what to do. So metta, loving kindness, is a profound medical art and emotional art. It's a combination of psychiatry and physical medicine. Thank you for that question. And I hope that is seared into everybody's mind that they really must do this ahead of time so that they can do it when the pain does come.
Ajahn, our next question is from Shrima W. in Calgary, Canada. Shrima, please ask Ajahn your question.
With reverence and respect to Ajahn Sona, our Kalyana Mitta, please explain how skillful deeds based on loving kindness would be either punya-kriya, where the aspiration is for material benefits and birth in heavenly realms, as against kusala-kriya, the aspiration for ultimate release of suffering, nibbana, or stages in the path. We often hear that blessing like, may you be born into wealth, may you be born in heavenly realms, and so on. How do we give meaning to loving kindness as kusala-kriya?
Yeah, thank you. That's a nice Buddhist question. And some of the in the audience, I just want to talk about a few of the terms that Srima mentioned there, punya and kusala. Punya is more or less positive results in the material dimension, money, clothing, shelter, all of the benefits. And these are said to be the karmic benefits of generating loving kindness. They also happen to be some of the benefits of practicing generosity. Now, generosity might be motivated by loving kindness, but from the Buddhist point of view, more or less whatever you put into the universe bounces back, and it bounces back in an amplified way. So even a small act of generosity can come back in multiple ways. And if that generosity is accompanied by a pure heart, a good positive emotion like loving kindness, it's even further amplified. So we have this question, loving kindness seems to function as almost the most, it's kind of nuclear power. It's a fantastic amount of energy in this emotion, and it has incredibly desirable results in terms of all of the material aspects. And by the way, I should also say that one's face, one's body and face is beautified by this emotion. It's very hard to actually be beautiful without having some aspect of loving kindness. The micro expressions of the eyes and the subtle expressions of the face and how you hold yourself and how you conduct yourself and the tone of your voice is beautified by the presence of loving kindness. And even though you might have a straight nose and good teeth and so forth, if you don't have positive emotions, it's kind of missing the element of beauty. Quite beyond that, it's said that future life. Why is one born beautiful? Why is one born beautiful, and why does beauty increase? It is said to be because of the practice of loving kindness in previous lives. So, and we will see that in the benefits of loving kindness in this very life, one's countenance is serenity and ease is produced in the face, the expression by this loving kindness. So it has a powerful effect, a shaping effect on every aspect of a being's life in the material dimension. And of course in the emotional dimension too. So now there's another aspect of loving kindness which Srima refers to as kusala-kriya. So kusala is skillful. And so you should memorize this Pali word, skillful, and use it all the time. Kusala is skillful activities of body, speech, and mind. And the opposite is akusala, unskillful activities of body, speech, and mind. And the Buddha often uses this kind of set of skillful versus unskillful as a summary of the whole path. So this is a very useful term, skillful and unskillful. quite beyond what we in ordinary language we talk about evil and good, or bad and good. In Buddhism, we refer to it as skills, the skills of goodness. And the lack of skill is based on ignorance. We simply don't know how to do things. So this kusala is moving us to the highest possible results. Beyond all of the beautiful results that we could have, both in the human realm and even beyond into, we talked about the heavenly realms. And I think I'm emphasized perhaps in one of the talks, I'm not sure what I've given the talk, but I definitely talked about the fact that you cannot separate the idea of heaven from consciousness. It doesn't mean that it's only a psychological fantasy or a psychological condition, but it means that you can't be in a beautiful transcendent experience except if you're going along with consciousness. Your consciousness is radiating and registering this experience. You fill this experience by consciousness. You can you imagine being depressed in heaven? Or angry in heaven? So it wouldn't do you much good. It wouldn't be heaven. So the outside dimension, the exterior dimension, and the interior dimension have to be as one. And so this ultimate aim of loving kindness is to pave the road towards nibbana. And how does it do that? Loving kindness in itself cannot deliver you to this highest condition of nibbana. But because loving kindness reduces your anger and your greed, it allows your mind to be in a serene and lucid condition. And that serene and lucid condition is called increasing wisdom. And so when we stop a feedback cycle between greed, hatred, and its root, delusion. So the roots of greed and hatred, the root of greed and hatred is ignorance or delusion. Because of our ignorance and our delusion, anger and greed manifest because we don't know any better. It's a lack of skill, lack of understanding, and it impedes our capacity to arrive at unshakable well-being and peace. And this is the nature of nibbana. It has a nature. Nibbana, you hear this word nirvana, is the more common way of talking about it. Nirvana. What is nirvana? It's defined in this life as 7 factors of enlightenment, 7 qualities of the mind. And they're all beautiful, positive qualities. And they can't arise, really, unless you have diminished ignorance and delusion. But how do you diminish ignorance and delusion? By cutting off its food source. What is the food source of ignorance and delusion? Why does it persist? It persists primarily through the emotions of anger and greed. When they're active, they're actually feeding your misunderstanding about the world and about yourself, how things work, where happiness lies. Anger is giving you false messages. Greed is giving you false messages. And you end up with a map that doesn't represent reality, that can't get you to happiness. You can't get on this, the map itself is wrong. That's what ignorance is, the wrong map. And you can't, following that map, you can never get where you would like to go. And you have an intuition that you would like to go to freedom, ease, well-being, and happiness. But when you follow the map that anger and greed makes, and you can't get there. So loving kindness reduces the energy and the food of ignorance and delusion. It reduces it, and then it shrinks. Your ignorance and delusions shrink. It's like shrinking a tumor that's blocking your throat or your well-being. You're shrinking this until suddenly you start to feel like you can get some relief through your throat. You start to feel differently. You start to feel spacious, open, well. This is a strange experience. That's all you have to do. So this is the function of loving kindness. It can't in itself arrive at nirvana or nibbana. There's a little information packet that is required for that, and that is the clear seeing of impermanence, unsatisfactory, and selflessness. The insubstantiality of your idea of yourself, that the idea of self is is intrinsically an illusion. And the things that you look to stabilize and keep in your life are intrinsically impermanent and cannot be stabilized and kept. And so that misinformation always frustrates you, always ends in suffering. Now, if we can undo that, we can deliver ourselves from this inevitable types of recurrence of suffering. So that's the function of loving kindness as kusala leading to nibbana. But loving kindness is also leads to abundance in life. Could it lead to both? Could it lead both to profound beauty and wealth and all of these things and nibbana? Yes, it can. You get dual benefits from loving kindness. One is that it bounces back, and by the laws of karma, the positive wished for results come back in the material dimension, and also the ultimate positive result in the realm of wisdom, the release from suffering through insight. So this is how it works.
Our next question is from Tandon S. from White Salmon, USA. Tandon, please ask Ajahn Sona your question.
Could it be that this pandemic has brought with it good conditions for the development of loving kindness? During the past year, I have felt more and more easeful and more in the present, a quieter life that I think I may always have longed for. Truthfully, I've been very happy most of the time, even relieved. Naturally, I have known sorrow through it as well, much sadness. But even this strong aspect of it keeps pointing at the investigation of the true nature of reality, nurturing that reflection. Pondering, I can't escape new feelings of insight into this, and it's something I realize that I have lacked. Ending this year with the Birkin retreat feels so right, and I am immersed in the wonderful sensation of kind of holding hands with all of these people spread across the planet. There's a sense of wonder and a beautiful warmth and appreciation fills my being. Though you have spoken of it often and I have read about it in the suttas, I feel like I'm finally really understanding this treasure of spiritual friendship, and it gladdens my heart. Will you expound a bit on this? Am I on the right fork of this path, or perhaps a wee detour? Please advise me. Your teachings are so clearly spoken and illustrated and understandable. I thank you, Long Persona.
Thank you, Tandon, for the question. So yes, the pandemic, which is quite a rare event, we haven't had one for more than a century, has really put a wrench into things, hasn't it? Everybody's life has changed. And now you can experience it two ways. One as a terrible frustration and so forth, but many of the spiritual people are kind of saying, there's a good side to this. It slowed everything down. And you're very fortunate if you have actually trained in meditation and a spiritual dimension, because you are as if you had been training for a pandemic. It's like taking swimming lessons for a long time, and then the tsunami comes. That happened actually. I was. You remember this tsunami in Sri Lanka and Thailand? I was just entering into winter retreat. I think it was 15 years ago or so. And suddenly I got a call. I had looked forward to being in retreat. I got a call from the Sri Lankan and Thai societies in Vancouver. Could I please come down there and give a talk and so forth to around the survivors and the raising funds for the tsunami victims? 250,000 people died in a space of a few minutes. So you're talking about the entire death rate of the COVID in the United States died in about 10 minutes in that tsunami. So I went down there, and we rented a big theater in Vancouver, and many people came, and some Thai monks chanted and so forth, and we had some survivors from the tsunami, and there were Canadians who were there, and they got swept away in the tsunami, and they survived. And one of them was a grade 2 teacher. And she talked about how she survived, and she said, well, I trained as a child right up till my teens as a competitive swimmer. And it grabbed me and swept me and held me under, but I didn't panic. I held my breath, and then when I saw the light, I swam for the light, and I broke through the surface. And so this is the case. She wouldn't have made it if she hadn't trained. So this kind of pandemics and tsunamis and all of these events are always on the horizon. This is not the end of it. Sometimes they sweep everybody up, as in the tsunami. Sometimes they sweep worldwide, as in the pandemic. But even if you manage to escape some tsunamis and pandemics, there's one tsunami that you're not going to escape, that everybody is a brother and a sister in. We're all brothers and sisters facing the tsunami of death. No one escapes. We're all swept away in that. Also pain experiences, sickness, aging. It must occur to every single being. No one escapes this. So this feeling is quite often hidden from us. We forget this. We forget that the mortality rate is 100%. After about 100 years, 100%, there's 8 billion people on the planet right now. Divide 8 billion by 100, see how your math is. It's about 80 million. 80 million people on average, have to die every year, because the whole population, everybody who's born, doesn't last much more than 100 years. So you can figure that everybody on the planet, 8 billion people, have to die one way or another. And we're all holding hands in this. And we're all hopefully sharing some information about how to deal with this situation. The pandemic sort of puts it in your face. It's every morning in the papers. It's all through the news. It's in the conversations. The death rate, and of course it's all mixed in with underlying health conditions and aging. So it goes through the aged population first. So what do you have there? The primary thing that the Buddha is always talking about: illness, aging, death. Illness, aging, death. So we're all born into this. And should we be just terrified and distressed by this inevitable situation? Or should we feel a sense of ease and loving kindness do what we can for each other during this time, exchanging gifts and helping each other. That's the only sensible way to live. In the face of illness, aging, and death, what shall we do? What shall we do? And what we should do is practice loving kindness. And we can't practice loving kindness unless we keep our virtue, the precepts, restraint, and practice acts of generosity and kindness. And so that is the simple answer to how do you deal with this pandemic, and how can you be at peace in the midst of this pandemic, because there's actually nothing special going on. It's a pandemic now, or it's a pandemic next week, or next month, or next year. One way or the other, we're all in the pandemic. And one day we check into the emergency ward and we don't come out. And everybody you know, all your relatives, all your pets, everybody is under that condition. It's just the only thing we don't know is when. Death is certain. When is uncertain. How shall we live in the meantime? That's the only question. How shall we live in the meantime? And the Buddha, as a great teacher, says, here it is. It's quite simple. Cultivate these positive emotions. You'll have the maximum of happiness in this life. And if there are conditions which lead on that are positive, then it must be the best investment you ever made. So, yes, a sense of brotherhood and sisterhood in the midst of this should arise naturally to the spiritual practitioner. And you know what arises for those who don't practice? Just confusion, frustration, outrage. They don't know how to deal with that, so then they do unskillful things, etc. So that you have a choice. You can live like that, unskillfully or skillfully. Which would you like? Take your choice. So that's a little reflection on the question by Tandon.
Ajahn, our next question is a combined one that we received. Can metta lead to the jhanas and enlightenment?
Metta can lead to the jhanas, and it's a beautiful application of the jhanas are deep states of profound unification of the mind, one-heartedness, unification of your emotional structure, which is extraordinary. And that should be cultivated. It's a great way to, if you have the time, if you're not too distracted by your family and livelihood and these things, it's a great thing to endeavor towards. And but it does require considerable preoccupation with this. It has great rewards, but it demands great time and great cultivation and good instruction. By the way, so this 10-day metta retreat has information in it that can help you get to the state of jhana. And I gave a jhana retreat also, and it's online. It's on the Ajahn Sona channel. And it's 6 talks on jhana. Most of the information is around breath meditation leading to jhana. But loving kindness also can lead to jhana. The first, second, and third stages of jhana can be attained through loving kindness. Does it lead automatically to enlightenment? No, it leads to the doorstep of enlightenment, but you still need the key. It's like you get all the way to this incredible mansion and you're right at the front door, but the door's locked. If you haven't got the key, then you can't open that door. But metta can get you all the way to the door. The door unlocks with three keys: anicca, dukkha, anatta. Insight into anicca, dukkha, anatta. This insight, which is often the word vipassana, etc., is often used. I really want to emphasize that all it means is you see clearly. You see clearly the conditions of reality, that everything is transient, flowing. There's nothing solid in it. Because of this transient, flowing nature of reality, you cannot stabilize it. It's unsatisfactory. You can't get a condition that it remains and is satisfactory indefinitely. And in the solution to that is that the one who is experiencing this, which we sense and intuit and feel, is ourself. The very one the self that travels through time unchanged is an illusion. It is not the case that we have somebody there behind our eyes that looked out of our eyes yesterday and will look out of our eyes tomorrow and is unchanged. That is an illusion that should be examined. And when that sense of self is seen through, the anicca, the dukkha, anatta is seen through, the impermanence, the unsatisfactoriness, and the nature of the self is seen through, then you're liberated. That is the arrival at nibbana. Nibbana is the cessation of suffering. So that it shouldn't be too mysterious. It's the Buddha just makes a simple statement. It is the end of suffering.
Ajahn, our next question is from Mudita from Kamloops, Canada. Ajahn, when I do feel contentment in my simple life and all of a sudden question it when someone asks, "What did you do today?" I'm afraid of saying I did nothing. So how do I keep the content feeling of being alone and out there without trying to be busy to almost hide my content feeling?
Yeah, we're in a world that continually interrogates us as, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? Everybody's real busy doing. And there's these little funny phrases like, are you a human doing or a human being? So we're trying to switch over from a human doing to a human being. And one of the delightful experiences of a human being is to simply not do anything. But it turns out it's a fine art, especially if you're raised in a society where everybody only gives you any value by what you do. So and they give you credit for doing useless things as well. If you just do a bunch of jumping jacks, you can be proud of yourself. You say, "What were you up to?" "I was jumping up and down for 20 minutes. I was running ultra marathons." Humans end up doing desperate things. I find ultra marathons desperate. I find the kind of hobbies that people have as well desperate. Like, what are you doing down in the basement there, making elaborate buildings out of playing cards? What is that all about? What are you trying to avoid? Well, I know why you do it, because you're uncomfortable with being. What rushes up in human consciousness is like, what's the point of this? And even more, I am going to die, and this makes me uncomfortable and anxious, etc. So this is the existential realization. And much of the activities that people do are just avoidances of this uncomfortable feeling in their own presence without doing anything. So if you're one who is a human being, I congratulate you. And of course, you don't have to explain this to all of the human doings that are always asking you, "What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing?" Because you'll get in trouble if you say, "I'm being." I don't do, I just be. I lived, before I was a monk, I was a kind of a monk. And I lived in a little shack in the middle of nowhere because there was no other way to spend all my time exploring what it is to be a human being if I didn't stop being a human doing. So I found a little shack for next to nothing, and I lived there for some years. But because I was living without working and I just wanted all my time for meditation and so forth, I had to actually hitchhike to the nearest town to get groceries once in a while. And you just got into a car with any stranger. And the shack was in the middle of nowhere, so standing on the side of a kind of an empty highway that one car an hour would pass. And so when somebody did stop, you got in. And one of the inevitable questions was, where do you live? And I would answer, in that shack over there. And then I could see them thinking, oh, he's fallen on hard times. What do you do? Was the next one. And I would always very clearly answer, nothing. And then they would deal with that by saying, oh, I'm sure things will improve and you'll get a job. And I would always say, I hope not. So some of them could understand it, but others were quite offended by the entire idea that I had chosen not to work, not to do anything, but to live in a broken down shack in the middle of nowhere, and very deliberately trying to cultivate the fine art of doing nothing. Now, this doesn't mean that you're drunk all day or anything like that, but this means that it's a fine art and a delicate and difficult thing to do. So one woman asked me, after hearing my response of that I lived in a broken down shack and I didn't do anything, she said, well, don't you want to make your mark in the world? And it was winter and there was snow everywhere. I said, oh, don't you want to write your name in the snow? Like, what's the point? Tomorrow it'll be gone. If it's not gone tomorrow, it'll be gone next week. What mark? You want me to write it in stone? People, everything in this world is passing away, so your name also will pass away, even if you write it in stone. You can't make a mark in this world. It's made out of light. The world is made out of thickened light. I'm quoting Emerson. This world is nothing but thick light. Anyway, that is the fine art. Now, you may not want to be as combative as I was. I was 30 at the time. And I thought, well, I'm living alone here, but at least I can teach or challenge a few human doings on the way, and maybe it'll make some effect on them. But you may not want to be so gracious as to challenge them and say, why do you ask me what I do? Who cares? Yeah. Anyway, get comfortable, mudita, with being a human being and not having to justify the fact. Yes.
Ajahn, our next question is from Rob B. in Portsmouth, United Kingdom. Dear Ajahn, it seems that in general my mind is on automatic and I don't really have much control on how it generates emotions based on what I think, see, or hear. Can you talk about how much we need to put into metta practice to overcome these automatic reactions?
A lot. A lot. Because that is the nature of the ordinary person. It never occurs to them that they have any control over this or that they're choosing their emotions. Whether you might think that these things are rising spontaneously or just arise by themselves, but actually no, they have conditions. Nothing arises without preconditions. And, bubbling up of sadness or nostalgia or joy and so forth. This is the way people experience this. That's a pretty dangerous way to live, that you don't know what's coming next. It's you're being surprised by your own mind all the time. This is not a good condition to be in. So we are systematically sitting down and say, okay, enough of this. I want to choose how I feel. And I want to be able to maintain that. So that's quite a challenge, by the way. And that's the shocking truth that comes to you when you go to a meditation retreat. People go in there and realize, oh my goodness, why didn't anybody tell me I was crazy? You will find out sitting still in a beautiful, quiet, empty room that your mind is crazy. And you just had not noticed it because you thought that the traffic was crazy, that the weather was crazy, that the food was bad, or something like that. You always imagine there's a cause, an external cause for the way you feel, but actually, no. We can take away all the external causes, put you in a soundproof room, and all of those things will come up. You will be sad, and then you'll be happy, and then you'll be bored, and then you'll be amused, and on. And this is flooding out of you. But you can restructure those causes. You can put in new causes, and you will get new results. And that's the meditator's determination, and that's their real work in life. So, you go to work, you make your money and everything, but that's not your real work. There is real work in this life, and that is to train the mind. And the Buddha is on and on and on about this. Maybe Buddhism is the only religion and philosophy that absolutely insists that it's up to you and it can be done, and you must train yourself. And you train yourself relentlessly like an Olympic athlete. Olympic athletes waste their life. They should be training their mind, not their bodies. So the really good use of your time is to ceaselessly restructure that mind of yours. Then you will have something that you can carry with you that is not dependent on the frivolous, random, external situations that you have. So this is a full-time job. Frustration sometimes, and sometimes a little voice comes up and says, how come I have to do this and nobody else has to? It's like the kid that has to practice the violin in the basement while all the other kids go out and play baseball. But in the end, he can play the violin. But you'll be able to play something much better than the violin. You'll be able to play your own emotions, your own mind. And the kids that were all messing around outside, throwing balls around, will be at the mercy of their absolute madness and uncontrolled mind. So that's your choice.
Our next question is from Aidan D. in Victoria, Canada. Hello, Ajahn. Could you please explain what Vande means from the Buddham Vande chant that you gave this morning?
Yes. Buddham, Buddham, Buddham Vande. Dhammahang, Dhammahang, Dhammahang Vande. So this is, Vande is, I pay homage to the Buddha. So you hear the words Buddhang, that means Buddha. But then I say Buddhahang, I mean I, and then I say Vande, appreciate, remember, hold in high regard the Buddha. So Buddha, ahang, me, Vande, I respect the Buddha. I respect the Dhamma, I respect the Sangha. And that's just a little melody that's set to that, so it kind of soothing kind of thing, and you circle on that. Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha are called the three jewels in Buddhism. And they work together in an amazing way and have survived 25 centuries. And so this is a kind of a recollection, an easy one. Now, I chose these chants that I do during this retreat as trying to make them either full of meaningful content or just simply helping your mind relax to go into the state of loving kindness. So I chose some of the chants are just very simple, a few words that I just repeat with a little melody to them, and others are fully expounded in English, like the Karaniya Metta Sutta, the Discourse on Loving Kindness and the 11 Benefits of Loving Kindness. I do make sure that I read them out completely and define every single word. So there's information in the chanting, and then there's also a sense of appreciation and emotional connection with the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And I take this to retreats, so I do this Buddham Vande. And a lot of people ask me, what is it? Buddham one day? Buddham Monday? Is it Monday? Or one day? I said, it's nothing to do with one day. It's Vande. Vande, the V is Vande. So I'm glad you asked about that. And feel free to learn the tune and chant it to yourself. It's a nice little thing you can just absorb, and it gives you three or four words in Pali as well. Actually, 6 words: Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, I, respect. 5 words. So I think we will leave it at that for today.